TCU is healthy on defense. Will it be enough to slow down Noah Fafita and Teratua McMillan from Arizona? We'll talk about it next here on Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right, Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can also find us on your favorite podcast platform. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. TCU men's basketball, they take on Alcorn State tonight at Shalimar Arena, so that'll be fun. We'll break down that and just them kind of getting back on the hardwood after falling to Michigan on Friday. We'll also talk about Jack Bech, star Frog wide receiver, who's approaching 1,000 yards. He's got 982 right now on the season. And he'd actually be the first 1,000-yard receiver, I believe, since Josh Doxson. I think I'm getting that note right, which would be cool to see. But he's had an outstanding year since moving to outside wide receiver. He's up for the Biletnikoff Award. He's a semifinalist, so we'll break that down. But we start today with the news that TCU is getting healthier on the defensive side of the ball. Sonny Dykes said in his weekly press conference this week that Marcus Deal will be back at defensive tackle and that Cooper McDonald will also be back at stud linebacker. Devin Deal, Marcus's brother, has sort of stepped up in Cooper's absence, and Devin's been playing a lot of snaps throughout the season, has been productive. But with Cooper gone, he kind of took on more of the lion's share of those snaps as well. And then Hakeem Ajibalaiba, the other defensive tackle, who going into the Baylor game had been starting with Marcus. Well, I guess going into the Tech game was starting with Marcus, and Marcus got hurt. He was a starter for the Baylor game, but he got hurt on the first possession. Hakeem did, and had to leave, and then he was out for Oklahoma State. So those two big interior defensive linemen are back, along with Cooper McDonald at that stud linebacker position, which is good to hear. Sonny said Cooper and Marcus were for sure back. He said Hakeem had been practicing, according to Stephen Johnson from 4-Star Telegram. Hakeem had been practicing, and so he expected him to be available given that he's been active in practice. So this is one of the big benefits of the bye week. One is that you get some extra time to prepare for this Arizona team, which this is an Arizona team. This season has not gone how they expected. They're 4-6. They started the year in the preseason top 25. They were thought to be one of the teams that could challenge for a Big 12 title. This was a game that I kind of circled when the schedule came out of, okay, this stretch of Oklahoma State and Arizona in the span of 3 weeks, this could decide whether or not TCU has a chance to make it to Arlington, because those should be games with big stakes. That's not been the case. Oklahoma State and Arizona have both really struggled, but Arizona could still get to a bowl game if they win this game and then beat Arizona State. I don't think they would win 2 in a row. If they come into Fort Worth and get a victory, though, they would set themselves up to have a chance to extend their season and beat Arizona State, even though Sun Devils might end up being in the Big 12 championship game. Richie Bradshaw, the host of Locked On Sun Devils, has to be excited about that. Bottom line, they're essentially playing to extend their season and make it to the postseason. TCU has that locked up, but getting to 8-4, I think, would be a big boost for this team going into the offseason. And the thing about this Arizona offense specifically that concerns me, I still think getting Marcus Deal and Hakeem Ajibalaiba is massive, because those guys help you out so much at the point of attack in the run game, which you need, but they also can just blow up plays and cause negative plays by, reestablish the line of scrimmage and beating their guys off blocks. The interesting thing about this matchup as it pertains to those players being back, though, is Arizona does not run the ball well, or they have not so far this season. Quali Conley is their leading rusher. He's got 677 yards and 127 carries, averaging about 5 yards a rush. But overall as a team, they're averaging 4 yards a rush. Noah Fafita is not really known as a mobile guy. His numbers are a little bit deceiving rushing-wise. He's only got 29 yards rushing. A lot of that's because he's been sacked 24 times. But he's not typically somebody who's going to pull the ball down and beat you with his legs. He's mobile enough and athletic enough. He's mainly going to do it with his arm, though. But the combination to watch here, Noah Fafita, their quarterback, who is very talented and has had some issues with turnovers this year. He's thrown 11 picks, 15 touchdowns. He's also thrown for 2,500 yards, about a 60% completion percentage. But Teratua McMillan, who is also up for the Biletnikoff Award along with Jack Bech, he's a semifinalist. He has had an outstanding career and is having an outstanding season. 1,136 yards, averaging about 16 yards per catch. 69 receptions and 7 touchdowns. In the season opener, he had 300 yards against New Mexico. He had a game where he had over 200 yards against West Virginia. He had a huge game against Texas Tech. So he's been effective. This team has struggled, but individually, he is having an outstanding season. And I'm not sure what Andy Avalos is going to throw at him. You would hope that having some extra time to prepare would help. I imagine they're going to try to mix coverages up and just throw different DBs at him and with the idea of like, hey, if we give him different looks, he can't kind of develop a plan to beat one specific player. But I think Lamarian James will get the majority of the opportunities. Channing Canada has had a better last couple of weeks. Like he seemed to improve late. He seemed to have improved lately, but he's gotten beat at times. And then JT Broughton is having a really rough year outside of a nice week 1 performance against Eric Aomanar, which I think we can acknowledge now is probably aided a little bit by the fact that Broughton is a physical player and there weren't a lot of flags that night. So McMillan's a tough matchup. And I think the bigger news here from a health perspective, actually, even though I do think it's important that you have Marcus and Hakeem in the middle because that does help your run game, and you don't want a team like Arizona's going to get some yards through the air this week. That's just part of it. But you don't want them to start beating you with their weakness, quote unquote, or kind of the secondary nature of that offense, which is running the ball. If they're able to run the ball effectively and get in second and third and manageable, that makes the job even tougher for the defense because they will have their entire playbook sort of at their disposal, at any given time. I think the biggest aspect of this game, though, along with can your corners challenge McMillan and make life tough on him, is what does this pass rush look like? Devin Deal, Cooper McDonald coming back. Do you find a way to put them on the field at the same time often to give the opportunity to the quarterback? Does Marcel Brooks get some more opportunity this week? Do you throw Jonathan Backs in there this week to get some more opportunities? Can you get anything from, Nana Ofasa-Mensah, who has been not lighting up the stat sheet, has been a solid starter for you at that defensive end position throughout the season? That's going to be the key because there's nothing better to disrupt a passing game than to get pressure on a quarterback. And we've seen that through Josh Hoover's career. I mean, yeah, there have been times where secondaries have played well against him, but when we're talking about turning the ball over, not completing passes, 3 and outs, a lot of that has to do with bringing blitzes, bringing pressure, and in the instance of the Houston game, just getting pressure with 3 players. So can TCU consistently get pressure on Noah Fifita and make him uncomfortable and make life tough on him? Now, the challenging part of bringing blitzes is you need to get home or you're putting your corners and safeties in one-on-one situations on the outside, which is really going to challenge them to step up and make plays. You got to find a way to slow down McMillan, though, because that's going to be their first point of attack each and every week. Arizona defensively, they've struggled this year. They're getting about 28 points a game, which is kind of middle of the pack in the Big 12, and it's about 90th in the country. And then their other numbers from the defense perspective, as I pull up the NCAA website here, passing yardage-wise, they're 69th in the country. They're giving up about 220 passing yards per game. And then rushing defense, they are down the list there as well. I think giving up about 160 yards per game, 166 yards per game, 94th in the country. So defensively, they've struggled. And I was thinking about this today as I was driving to work. I think about podcast stuff when I drive to work, which I'm sure my day job boss loves to hear that. But since the second half of the Tech game, this offense has really been outstanding. I mean, they haven't punted the ball a lot. They haven't had a lot of empty drives. Maybe you could qualify it as saying the fourth quarter of that Tech game. But once they got down 31-14, they rallied back. They won that game 35-34, had that huge play to Eric McAllister, the back shoulder throw that he took to the house, put together a couple more drives that were really good and really promising that ended in touchdowns for TCU. Against Baylor, I mean, they lost that game, but aside from kind of an inconsistent first quarter where they had a few empty drives, and one of those plays was or one of those 3 and outs with Savion Williams just dropping a pass when he was wide open on 3rd and 10, which was unfortunate. But in the second half of that game, I mean, they really did what they wanted. They had 4th and 2 around midfield, and Sonny decided to punt instead of go for it, and that was kind of the ball game. It ended up being the ball game because the defense couldn't get a stop. But even when, Baylor took that lead late, they were able to get down quickly and score, get the ball in Jack Bech's hands in the end zone, and tie it up before Baylor put together that game-winning field goal drive. And the last week against Oklahoma State, they were impressive from a numbers perspective, stalled out in the red zone a few times in the first quarter. But I think the biggest thing that stood out to me about that game, when we're talking about the offense, was they had great response drives. So in the second half, when Oklahoma State put together a touchdown drive at the beginning of the third quarter, they immediately come back and score a touchdown. And then Oklahoma State on their second drive of the second half, they go down and score a touchdown. And TCU is able to get the big play to Jordan Bailey on the reverse. They kind of catch a break with Eric McAllister not getting called for holding, but whatever. Jordan's electric. He gets to gets in the end zone. And then that was really what put the game out of reach in a lot of ways. But it was a combination of like they were prolific and they did their job. They were efficient moving the ball, but also they made plays in key moments. And that's something that like we can talk about coaching and it's important and situational stuff. I think players have to realize too, there's moments in the game where you just have to make plays. Whether it's at the end of the ball game or just like key moments in the rhythm of a game where it's pretty clear, okay, this is a turning point and somebody's got to step up and defensively get a stop on 3rd down, or somebody's got to step up and move the chains here on 3rd and 9 so that we can go down and score and keep this lead. That was something against UCF that they couldn't do offensively. I mean, they weren't scoring in general, but as UCF started to pile up points, they just could not find a way to respond and sort of stem the tide, slow down the momentum. And, clock management was an issue that night as well, but they could not find a way to respond and kind of get off the mat, so to speak, in that ball game in the second half. So TCU, Arizona, 2:00 on ESPN+, kickoff at 2. Should be great weather, should be a good environment. Last home game, senior day, all the things. Excited to see it. When we come back, TCU has a wide receiver who is up for the most prestigious award at that position. And Sonny Dykes says they're going to use it as a recruiting pitch next season. That's here on Locked on Horned Frogs. It's your team. We do it here every day. Roy, return on you. It's a bye week, so it's kind of hard to come up with player of the week, but we're going to do one anyway. Let's go with Jack Bech because, as I'll mention here in a minute, he's a semifinalist for the Blitnikoff Award given to the nation's top wide receiver. He's had an outstanding season. He moved to that outside wide receiver spot before that first game against Stanford and has taken over and has become the dude in that receiving room all year long for Josh Hoover and this offense. Jack Bech, he's the type of guy you want to keep around. Roy allows fans to get involved in NIL directly. You can create an account on the Roy app to win free tickets to whatever game you want in the month of November. Win 2 tickets to whatever game you want in the month of November. If you download the Roy app and create an account today, you can donate directly to the funds of players that you care about. Every TCU athlete is on the Roy app. And if they collect those funds, then they will give you exclusive content and all that great stuff. If they don't, then you get a refund. Roy, return on you. It's the way for fans to get directly involved in NIL. Download the Roy app today. Also, a big thank you to our friends at Gametime. Gametime, it's the best place on the secondary ticket market. If you need tickets to a game, if you're trying to get out there to TCU, Arizona, I saw tickets as low as $40. It's up in the third row, but hey, you're in the stadium, you're there. If you're like, man, I want better seats, there's plenty of options there as well. The tickets go straight to your app, so you don't have to wonder, like, is it in my wallet? Where did it go? You go straight to your app. It's very easy to use. They give you a picture of what your view is going to be from your seat, and they also don't have hidden fees. So there's some fees involved, but they'll tell you what those fees are up front. Download the Gametime app today. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. Gametime. They make it easy for you. So an announcement came down today. The Blitnikoff semifinalists were announced, and one of those players was TCU's own Jack Bech, He joins Ja'Cory Brooks from Louisville, Harold Fannin from Bowling Green, Ty Felton from Maryland, Trey Harris from Ole Miss, Travis Hunter from Colorado, Teratuo McMillan from Arizona, Nick Nash from San Jose State, Xavier Recepto from Miami, Jeremiah Smith from Ohio State, and Ryan Williams from Alabama. I think Jack actually has a chance at this award. I wouldn't say he's the favorite. Usually it's going to go to somebody who is a big name, but also someone who is putting up crazy numbers, which Trey Harris might fit that bill the most. The leading receiver in the country is actually Nick Nash from San Jose State. Jack is 6th in yardage, and he's having an outstanding season, 982 yards receiving, 9 touchdowns, has become the main target for Josh Hoover. And, there were some clues about this before the year. I remember Sonny Dykes saying it was either spring camp or fall camp, he was like, the MVP of this camp and these practices were Jack Bech. And it was sort of eyebrow raising at the time because Jack dealt with injuries last year. And so he wasn't super active, but when he was available, he was a good target. And I remember in the BYU game, Josh found him a few times. But the crazy thing was, like, my image of him, or kind of my narrative around him as a player when I watched him last year, was he was a slot guy, maybe more of a tight end type, H-back type, and they were going to move him around the formation, try to create favorable matchups, and make things happen. I did not see him as an outside wide receiver, and thankfully the coaching staff did, and they made that move. Sonny said they made that move due to injury before the season opener, and I would love to know if that's actually the case or if they sort of made that decision earlier, and then because of the depth chart and some of the injury concerns, it just became very apparent that, we actually need to make this happen. Going into the year, I thought Savion Williams would be the guy. And I think the cool thing is it hasn't gone exactly how we expected, but both players have found a way to be extremely productive. Savion is second in the team with receiving yards of 580. He's got 6 touchdowns. He's also been very effective in this kind of, wildcat quarterback formation. They put him in the backfield some. He's become a rushing threat. He threw a touchdown pass to Jack Bech in the Baylor game. And Sonny Dykes said today that his move to that spot and then kind of making him a Swiss Army knife has been really beneficial to his draft stock, because teams are starting to see, okay, maybe this guy could be kind of a Deebo Samuel type or a Cordell Patterson type who has multiple roles and that you can isolate with matchups. He also said this about the receiver position. Dyke said TCU will be aggressive in the transfer portal at wide receiver. He says their pitch will be you have a chance to be a 1,000-yard receiver and play with one of the best quarterbacks in the country, Josh Hoover. And I think they're going to use this as an example of, hey, in the portal, like, Jack Bech was a guy that kind of fell out of not favor, but his role was diminished at LSU. He was looking for a place to go. TCU found him. They scouted him. They got him on campus, and they found a role for him at outside wide receiver that was going to work, and they're giving him a chance to thrive at the next level. He was super productive this year, and he went up and made great plays with a really good quarterback in Josh Hoover. So it's just awesome to see. It's great to see people that work hard and that just buy into the team culture and what TCU is all about and what they're trying to do. And Jack Bech seems to exemplify all that, succeed and do well. And I think it's even more awesome when they do it kind of in an unexpected way, because it speaks to the player and it speaks to the coaching staff, seeing the vision, saying, okay, this is what we need to do to set this person up for success, and getting them to a place where they can do it. So Jack Bech up for that Biletnikoff Award as semifinalist. Another player that is in that same boat as Teratuo McMillan. So we'll see both of those guys this week. But, I mean, it's not just like with Jack, it's not just he's a big body who can kind of make plays over the middle and be a dude that moves the chains. Like, he's shown the ability to get open deep this year and take the top off the defense. He's shown the ability to go get one-on-one balls like he did on the sideline in that first drive of the game against Oklahoma State. he's got the whole bag, which is awesome to see. And I'm excited to see what he does over the last 2 games of the regular season. When we come back, some audience questions and TCU basketball back at it tonight. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Thank you to one of our new sponsors, Mint Mobile. I love a great deal as much as the next guy, but I'm not going to crawl through a bed of hot coals just to save a few bucks. It has to be easy, no hoops, no BS. So when Mint Mobile said it was easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan, I called them on it. Turns out it is really easy to get wireless for $15 a month. The longest part of the process was the time I spent on hold waiting to break up with the old provider. To get started, go to mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege, and you'll see that right now 3-month plans are only $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with your existing contracts. To get this customer offer, your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. That's mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 GB on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. You can always chime in on the show and jump in on the show in the YouTube comments or tweet at me at SimcockSteven. Jim Norris had some nice things to say about the show. Appreciate you, Jim. Thank you for listening. You've been a long-time listener, viewer. I certainly appreciate you making time for it. And he wanted to know what my thoughts were on TCU's current athletic director, Jeremiah Donati, and the job he's doing. So I think overall, JD's done a good job. If I had to give it a class grade, I would say a B. I feel like he's made some really good hires in non-revenue sports that probably kind of go under the radar. So he hired Jason Williams as a volleyball coach, who has done an outstanding job taking this volleyball program from kind of cellar dweller in the Big 12 to perennial NCAA tournament team. And that's been cool to see. He also, I think the returns on Mark Campbell are really good, right? Early on, year 2, year 1, they had those injuries and the forfeits, which wasn't a great look, but it feels like they're in a place to be super competitive in year 2. Kirk Sarloos, I think, was the right hire, even though things kind of got squirrely last year. Hopefully they've rectified that. My only complaint about that deal was I was doing a podcast back then. I don't think many people were listening because I had just started, but I was doing a pod when Jim Schlossnagle left for A&M. And my thought was, even if Kirk ends up being your guy, I think you have to open it up and have a national search because it's a really good job. It's become a great baseball job, and it's become one of the premier jobs in the country. So you should have a serious coaching search to reflect that. They decided not to really do that. They just hired the guy that was here. And I mean, I understood the team was all for that. They were behind it. He's made the NCAA tournament twice. He made the College World Series once. Last year was rough, but hopefully they turned around this season. I think ultimately that was the right hire, even if I didn't totally agree with the way they went about it. The question, though, is, and a lot of this will hinge on what happens with Sonny Dykes. In year 1, I mean, it couldn't have gone better aside from if you found a way to win that game against Georgia or at least be more competitive. Year 2 and year 3 have been up and down. So that's going to tell a lot of the story. I think the other part of this that I can't really answer, not because I don't want to, but just because I don't feel like I have good enough intel to give a complete thought on it, is where is TCU in the world of realignment? How are they positioned as an athletic program in a university when it comes to if the Big Ten and the SEC want to expand again? I think the good news for TCU is that for a while it seemed like the talk was that the Big Ten and SEC would eventually just kind of secede from everybody and do their own thing. In the latest discussions about super leagues and breaking away from the NCAA model, there has been a more inclusive narrative that's being spun of, hey, everybody would be here. Maybe we wouldn't all make the same amount of money, but the Power Four would still be together as constructed. But that can change at any moment. We don't know what kind of back channel deals are going on. We don't know what's going to happen with the ACC, even though things have seemed to have calmed down there. So I don't know where his finger is on the pulse of the ever-changing landscape of college sports. And that coupled with what football does is really going to tell the story of what his job performance looks like. Because even though I think he has made some great hires, and I do feel like success creates success. So if you have successful programs, tennis has won a national title, soccer has stayed very solid. If you win in different sports, then that helps the other sports because they see the success and they say, all right, we gotta do this, we gotta buy in, we gotta see what these coaches are doing to be successful, right? So I think that means something, but at the end of the day, the revenue sports are driving the bus, and right now football is going to make it back to a bowl game, but I wouldn't say they are a player in the national conversation at the moment. And basketball, I think, has made a turnaround for sure. But I feel like the issue with basketball is there's a few blue bloods, and then tournament teams don't really get thought about as much in the national landscape, even though TCU has been solid for a few years now, and they're in the Big 12, which gives them a good spotlight. The majority of college basketball fans are casual fans. And so they watch, regionally, and then they tune in for the NCAA tournament. And I think if you ask the average person about TCU, they might not know a lot about the basketball program. So that has to play out. Speaking of the basketball program, but it's a great question. I appreciate your response or your question, and that would be my general response to it. Speaking of basketball, TCU hoops, the men, they play Alcorn State tonight at 6 o'clock at Shalimar Arena. Alcorn State's 0-4. Should be just a chance for this team to get back out there, get some things worked out, bounce back from that Michigan loss. I would guess Ernest Uday probably won't play. I mean, even if he's healthy, I'm not sure what the reason would be to risk it and get him out there so early coming off, some back stuff. But we'll see what happens, and we'll see what Jamie Dixon rolls out there tonight. We'll have coverage of that tomorrow, as long as continued coverage of this upcoming game against Arizona. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast.